let's unpack this. It is Tuesday, February 3, 2026. And I want to start today's deep dive by asking you to do something a little weird.
Uh-oh.
No, it's simple. I just want you to mentally walk through your day so far, just for a second. Think about the advertisements you saw on the subway or, the highway on your way to work.
Okay.
Think about the t-shirt the barista at the coffee shop was wearing. Think about the memes you just scrolled past on your feed while you were waiting for that coffee.
I think I know where you're going with this.
If you're really paying attention, you probably noticed that a significant percentage of those images, they weren't photos of real people. They were stylized 2D character.
Big eyes.
Big eyes, spiky hair, hyperkinetic movement. We're not talking about cartoons today. We are not talking about something you put on to distract a toddler for 20 minutes.
No. If you're still calling it cartoons, you are, frankly, operating on a definition that expired about 30 years ago.
Exactly. We are talking about what our sources are calling, and I love this phrase, even though it sounds a bit intense, global cultural infrastructure.
It does sound intense, but it's accurate.
I have to pause on that word, though. Infrastructure. Usually when we use that word, we mean roads, power grids, fiber optic cables, things that civilization literally runs on. Are we really claiming that Japanese animation has reached that level of utility?
I am, and I think the sources back that up quite convincingly. Just look at the raw numbers for a second. As of where we sit right now, in early 2026, the global anime market is valued at approximately $55 billion.
55 billion. That's a number that is just, it's hard to wrap your head around.
To give you a sense of scale, that's larger than the entire GDP of many mid-sized nations. It's significantly larger than the global recorded music industry was just, say, a decade ago.
Wow.
But infrastructure isn't just about the money. It's about reliance. It's about how deeply integrated it is into the machinery of global commerce and, maybe more importantly, identity. And there was a very specific tipping point for this.
You're talking about the shift in June 2024.
June 2024. This is a date that I think historians of pop culture are going to circle in red ink for a long time.
Yep.
About a year and a half ago, the Japanese government made a move that sounded, on paper, really boring. Bureaucratic even.
Right.
But it was actually revolutionary. They reclassified the anime industry.
So before this, it was just, entertainment or arts and culture, something like that.
Exactly. It was in the same bucket as like kabuki theater or traditional flower arranging, a cultural artifact.
A hobby.
But in June 2024, under this new initiative they call the New Cool Japan Strategy, the government officially designated anime as a basic industry.
Oh, a basic industry. That's a term that we usually reserve for things like steel production, automotive manufacturing, or semiconductors.
Precisely. And just think about the psychological and economic implication of that change for a moment. If steel production stops, the country halts.
Right.
If you stop making cars, the economy crashes. Japan effectively declared that if anime production stops, it represents a catastrophic failure of their national output.
They're viewing it as a utility.
They're viewing animation not just as a cultural export, but as a pillar of their national stability.
That is just wild. They're basically saying, we build Toyotas, we build bridges, and we build Goku.
And they're betting the house on it. They set a target market value of 20 trillion yen. That's roughly, $127 billion by 2033.
That is not a hobbyist's goal.
No, that is a geopolitical strategy.
So our mission today is to figure out how in the world we got here. How did we go from this niche subculture of people trading grainy VHS tapes in the 90s to a world where anime is legally classified on the same level as steel?
What an incredible story.
And we have a stack of sources today that are fascinating. We've got this historical analysis called Anime's Global Odyssey. We have some really deep economic reports on the 2026 industry landscape, and this is the part I'm really excited about. Some really heavy psychological studies on why our brains are actually wired to watch this stuff.
And we are going to try to answer a core question that runs through all of them. How did a specific form of Japanese animation become what some sociologists are now calling a modern mythology for the entire world?
How does a medium born from post-war rubble become the dominant media language of the 21st century?
Yeah.
To answer that, we have to rewind. And I don't mean rewind to the 90s and the VHS tapes. We have to go way back. We have to go back to the ashes.
I need to go back to 1945.
So set the scene for us. What does Japan look like in 1945?
World War II has just ended. Japan has surrendered unconditionally. The country is, and this isn't an exaggeration, physically devastating.
We're talking about firebombing.
We're talking about major cities, Tokyo, Osaka being firebombed into oblivion. The infrastructure, the actual roads and buildings is gone. But more importantly, the psychological infrastructure is gone.
Right. The entire national identity was so tied to the emperor, to military strength, to this idea of divine invincibility, and that was all just shattered overnight.
It was a complete vacuum of purpose, a national psychological void. And history tells us that when a society faces that kind of void, it desperately needs new stories to make sense of the world.
To figure out who they are now.
Exactly. Visual storytelling became a way to reimagine what the nation's purpose could possibly be.
And into this void steps a man who is, I think it's fair to say, the grandfather of everything we are talking about today, Osamu Tezuka.
The god of manga, the Walt Disney of Japan, though that comparison is a bit simplistic.
Now, what's so fascinating about Tezuka is that he wasn't an artist by trade. He was a medical student, wasn't he?
A medical student, yes. He had a clinical, almost surgical understanding of anatomy, of life and death, of the human body.
Which you can see in his art, actually.
You can, but his passion was comics, and specifically he was obsessed with Walt Disney. He reportedly watched Bambi over 80 times. He loved the fluidity, the emotion of American animation. But he was looking at this post-war rubble, and he wanted to create something that spoke to that specific Japanese anxiety, that mix of trauma and technological hope.
And so he creates Astro Boy in 1963.
Tetsuwan Atom, or Mighty Atom in Japan.
Yes.
Astro Boy to the rest of the world.
No, I think most people, if they know Astro Boy at all, they just think of this cute robot kid with pointy hair flying around fighting bad guys. But our sources suggest it was way, way deeper than that.
It was a philosophical inquiry disguised as a children's show. Think about the premise for a second.
Yeah.
A brilliant scientist, Dr. Tenma, loses his real son, Tobio, in a car accident.
Yeah.
In his grief, he builds a powerful robot replacement. But then he has this horrifying realization that the robot can't grow up, it can't be human, so he rejects it. He sells his son to a robot circus.
That is incredibly dark for a Saturday morning cartoon.
It's heartbreaking. It deals with abandonment, with grief, with the question of, do I have a soul? And it is all set against this backdrop of atomic anxiety.
Right, because this is less than 20 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
The power of the atom, which literally destroyed parts of Japan, is now the power source inside this little boy's chest. It's his heart. Tezuka was asking these huge questions. Can technology save us, or will it ultimately destroy us? And what does it even mean to be human in a world that's becoming dominated by machines?
Those are the same questions we're asking now in 2026.
Exactly the same questions.
That's heavy. But here's where it gets really interesting for me. The style. The actual look and feel of anime that we all recognize today. The big eyes, the sometimes jerky movements, the static backgrounds with speed lines whizzing by. That wasn't just an artistic choice, was it?
No. And this is the aha moment for the entire industry. It was an innovation born of absolute crushing poverty. Tezuka wanted to animate, but he couldn't afford Disney-level production. He just didn't have the money.
Okay, so let's get technical for a second. When you say Disney level, what does that actually mean in terms of like the physical act of drawing?
So, in traditional high-budget animation, like Disney's Snow White or Pinocchio, you animate on ones. Film runs at 24 frames per second. Animating on ones means you draw a new, unique image for every single one of those 24 frames.
A new drawing for every frame.
It creates that incredibly smooth, fluid, lifelike motion that Disney is famous for. But think about the labor.
It sounds exhausting and expensive. 24 pictures for just 1 second of screen time.
It is insanely expensive and labor-intensive. Tezuka didn't have the money, he didn't have the staff, and crucially, he didn't have the time. He had a weekly TV schedule to hit. There was no way. So he hacked the system. He essentially invented what we now call limited animation.
Limited animation. It almost sounds derogatory, like it's a flaw.
It sounds like bad animation, but it was actually a stroke of strategic genius. Instead of animating on ones, Tezuka animated on threes, or sometimes even fours.
Which means?
It means one single drawing is held on screen for 3 or 4 frames before the next drawing appears. So you're only drawing 8, or even just 6, new pictures per second instead of 24.
So the character isn't moving as much? The image is more static?
Barely at all in some cases. He reduced the frame count drastically, but, and this is the absolute genius part, to hide the lack of movement, he compensated with other cinematic tricks.
Like what? What did he do?
He focused on things film directors do. Dynamic camera angles, pans, zooms, dramatic close-ups. He created the bank system, where you create one really cool animation sequence, like a character transforming or a robot launching, and you just reuse it every single episode.
Ah, the Sailor Moon transformation scene.
The ultimate example.
Yeah.
And he perfected the mouth flap technique, where a character's entire face is a static painting, and only a separate cell for the mouth moves up and down.
I think everyone recognizes that. It's the classic anime conversation scene. Two people standing perfectly still, wind blowing their hair dramatically, and only their mouths are moving.
Exactly. But here's the crucial thing. Because he wasn't spending his tiny budget on 24 frames of complex movement, he could spend his time and resources making that one static frame look incredibly detailed and beautiful.
Oh, that makes sense.
He could focus on the eyes, making them large and expressive to convey emotion. He could focus on the intricate design of the mecha or the background.
So the entire cinematic coolness of anime, the way a character will stand perfectly still on a cliff with just the wind blowing their cape while I deliver a 3-minute monologue, that whole aesthetic exists because Tezuka was broke.
Essentially, yes. It was a paradigm shift. It changed the focus of the medium from movement to mood. Disney was trying to perfectly simulate reality. Tezuka was trying to efficiently capture emotion. And that single constraint-based innovation created the visual language for the entire industry that followed.
That is the ultimate example of it's not a bug, it's a feature. The bug became the defining feature of the entire medium.
And allowed an industry to be built from practically nothing.
So Tezuka builds this foundation, then we move into the 70s and 80s, and things start to get a little darker, a little more psychological.
The 70s were a really important turning point inward. Japan's post-war economic miracle was in full swing, but there was this undercurrent of disillusionment. And the defining work here is Mobile Suit Gundam in 1979.
Gundam. Even people who don't watch anime know Gundam.
Right. Before this, robot shows were really simple. A good guy and a cool robot punches a bad monster. It was black and white. Gundam completely deconstructed that.
How so? What did it do differently?
It treated the giant robot, the Gundam, not as a superhero, but as a weapon, a tank. It was a piece of military hardware. It broke down, it ran out of ammo, it needed maintenance.
It wasn't invincible.
Not at all. And the pilot, Amuro Ray, he wasn't this brave, gung-ho hero. He was a terrified, socially awkward teenager who was forced into the cockpit and was suffering from severe PTSD as a result.
So it was about war trauma.
It was about war trauma, politics, the morality of child soldiers, xenophobia. It depicted a war where there were no clear good guys or bad guys. Both sides committed atrocities. It reflected the cynicism of a generation that had grown up in the shadow of World War II, but was now seeing the moral complexities of the Cold War and Vietnam playing out on their TVs.
And then the economy just explodes in the 80s, the famous bubble economy.
The bubble era. This is absolutely crucial for understanding the next big wave, which was the cyberpunk genre. Japan was suddenly incredibly rich. Insanely rich. The yen was strong, cash was flowing, real estate in Tokyo was worth more than all of California, and technology was booming. Sony Walkman, Nintendo.
Right, Japan felt like the future.
It did. And all that disposable income fueled the OVA market original video animation.
This is the direct-to-video stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like buying VHS tapes.
Exactly. And because it wasn't on broadcast television, they didn't have to worry about censors or advertisers or pleasing a mass family audience.
They could get weird with it.
They could get weird. They could get incredibly violent. They could get philosophical and dense. They could target niche adult audiences.
So this is where we finally get Akira.
Akira in 1988, and then a little later, Ghost in the Shell in 1995. These are the twin masterpieces of the bubble era and its aftermath.
I mean, Akira is still mind-blowing to watch today. The level of hand-drawn detail is it's insane. Every single frame is a work of art.
It is. It had a budget that was unheard of at the time.
Yeah.
But look at what it's actually saying. It depicts this high-tech but decaying and corrupt Neo-Tokyo. It's exporting this uniquely Japanese cultural anxiety. We have all this incredible technology, we have all this money, but are we losing our souls in the process? Are we just building a beautiful, shiny shell over a rotting, empty core?
An anxiety that the rest of the world was starting to feel too.
Absolutely. And that message resonated globally. I mean, it's not a stretch to say that the Matrix simply does not exist without Ghost in the Shell. Stranger Things owes a huge debt to Akira's psychic kids.
So Japan was essentially exporting its own existential crisis.
And the rest of the world looked at it and said, yeah, we feel that too.
Okay, so that's the history. We've gone from rubble to realistic robots to cyberpunk nightmares. It's a clear evolution. But I want to pivot now to the psychology of the viewer. Because the big question is still, why do we watch it? Why does a teenager in Ohio or a businessman in Berlin or a student in Brazil connect so deeply with a story about, say, a Japanese high school volleyball team?
This is where we get into some really fascinating theories from the source material. And one of the most important concepts to understand is a Japanese term called mukokuseki.
Mukokuseki. Okay, that's a mouthful. Let's unpack that.
It literally translates to something like statelessness or lacking nationality.
Yeah.
It refers back to the character design we talked about earlier with Tezuka. If you look at most mainstream anime characters, they often lack explicit, realistic ethnic markers.
You mean they don't look Japanese?
They don't look realistically Japanese, no. But they don't look realistically Caucasian either. They have hair that's pink, or blue, or green, or gravity-defying silver spikes. Their eyes are enormous and come in every color imaginable.
Right. They exist in this weird, racially ambiguous visual middle ground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the psychological implication of this statelessness is that it creates what one of our sources calls a fantasy space. It operates like a Rorschach test for the viewer.
What do you mean by that?
Because the character doesn't look specifically like a realistic person from any country, viewers from every culture can more easily project themselves onto that character. The visual design removes the initial barrier of otherness.
That makes perfect sense. If I watch a live-action Japanese movie, I am very aware that I'm watching a Japanese person in Japan. It's a cultural window.
Yeah.
But if I watch Naruto, I don't see a Japanese boy. I just see a lonely teenager who wants to be accepted.
Precisely. The visual abstraction removes that initial cultural barrier to entry. The kid in Ohio doesn't see a foreigner. He sees a mirror of his own feelings. It bypasses our innate cultural filters. When a character in an anime struggles for recognition from their peers, that isn't just a Japanese struggle. It's a universal adolescent struggle. The lack of strict visual realism in the face actually allows for a deeper, more universal emotional immersion.
That's fascinating, and that connects to another idea I saw in the notes, this concept of the second world or compensatory reality.
Yes, this is rooted in some pretty serious psychological research on emotional regulation and parasocial relationships.
Parasocial, meaning the one-sided relationships we form with media figures.
Right. The research indicates that the exaggerated emotional expressions in anime, the giant conical teardrops when someone's sad, the veins popping out on their forehead when they're angry, the massive full-face blushes when they're embarrassed, they allow for a clarity of emotion that real life often lacks.
Real life is messy. People hide their feelings, they're passive-aggressive. In anime, if someone is embarrassed, steam literally comes out of their ears. You can't misread that.
It's emotionally legible, it's safe, it is unambiguous. And for where we are in 2026, this is absolutely crucial. We have a data point here from a recent study. It shows that 71% of youth viewers report that anime provides significant emotional support during periods of social isolation.
71%. That's huge. That's almost 3/4 of the entire young audience using it as a form of coping mechanism.
It creates a powerful parasocial relationship. The characters feel like reliable friends because their emotions are so clear and accessible. It offers what psychologists call a compensatory reality for a generation that might be struggling with unprecedented levels of loneliness or social anxiety. It's a world where friendship is absolute, loyalty is rewarded, and effort almost always yield results, which, let's be honest, isn't always true in the messy real world.
It's an emotional toolkit.
A very effective one, and this ties into a more Jungian analysis as well. Anime protagonists, especially in shonen, often embody classic archetypes: the orphan, the mentor, the shadow. They go on a very clear hero's journey. For an adolescent who is asking that fundamental question, who am I? These stories provide a form of identity rehearsal.
Trying on different identities to see which one fits.
Exactly. Am I the hot-headed hero? Am I the cool intellectual rival? Am I the steadfast friend? It's a safe space to explore the self.
There is another theory in here, though, that I found kind of mind-bending. The database consumption theory from the philosopher Hiroki Izuma. It sounds a bit more, I don't know, cynical.
It is a bit more cynical, or perhaps just more structural and less romantic. Izuma argues that as we moved into the late 20th and early 21st century, the modern fan, the otaku, doesn't necessarily consume a story from start to finish for the narrative arc or the character development.
So they aren't in it for the plot.
Not primarily, according to this theory. Instead, they consume a database of mo elements.
Mo, which is that feeling of deep affection or protectiveness you get for a fictional character.
Right. But Izuma breaks it down further. He says fans are looking for specific, recognizable, modular traits. cat ears, maid outfits, glasses, and eye patch, a specific personality type like Sundar, the character who is mean and aggressive on the outside, but secretly kind and caring.
So it's like character design with Lego bricks.
That is the perfect analogy. The theory is that many modern fans treat characters like Lego constructions. I like this hair color, plus this personality type, plus this specific voice actor. They are assembling their ideal object of affection from a shared public database of tropes, rather than engaging with a unique, holistic human story.
That actually explains a lot about modern content consumption in general, not just anime. It's exactly how the TikTok algorithm works. Oh, you liked a video with cottagecore aesthetic plus sad indie music? Here are 1,000 more just like it.
Exactly. Azuma was basically diagnosing the algorithmic brain before the algorithm took over. Anime was just doing it 30 years earlier. And the industry knows this. They often engineer shows by just hitting those database buttons. Okay, for this season, we need a cool, white-haired girl with glasses and a shy personality to capture that specific demographic.
Which brings us right back to that central tension we keep circling, the tension between art and product.
It's the defining struggle of the entire industry. Always has been.
Speaking of products, let's talk money. We mentioned that staggering $55 billion figure at the top, but I want to talk more about how the Japanese government is looking at this now. We talked about the basic industry classification.
Right, the new cool Japan strategy of 2024. It's so fascinating because it's a national admission that their old economic model isn't enough anymore. Japan has an aging population, their domestic consumer market is shrinking, they need to sell something to the world, and they've realized that the thing that can sell better than almost anyone else is cool.
And this is the whole concept of soft power.
Right. It's a term coined by Joseph Nye. Soft power is the ability to get what you want through attraction and cultural influence, rather than coercion, which is hard power, like military force.
So instead of sending a warship, you send Pikachu.
And Pikachu is often more effective in the long run. Japan exerts massive cultural influence globally without firing a single shot. And from an economic standpoint, anime is a recession-proof engine. And looking at the economic projections for 2026, the growth is incredibly steady. The KGR, the compound annual growth rate that they're projecting, implies a steady 9.6% growth year over year to hit that 2033 target.
Can we briefly talk about that math? Because I saw the formula in the notes and my eyes just kind of glazed over.
It looks complex, but the concept is simple. It's just a way to measure the speed of a snowball rolling down a hill. If you take the target value for 2033, or 20 trillion, and you divide it by the current value in 2026, and you do a little bit of math with the number of years, well, the conclusion is what's important. The math basically says this train is not slowing down, it's projecting almost 10% growth every single year.
Which is incredibly rare for a mature industry of this size.
Almost unheard of. It's the kind of growth you expect from a tech startup, not a century-old art form.
And we can see that growth anecdotally, just by looking around. We see the mainstreaming of anime. It's absolutely everywhere.
It is cool Japan in action. Look at high fashion. You have the luxury Spanish brand Loewe selling these beautifully crafted Howl's Moving Castle handbags for $3,000.
Which sold out instantly, by the way. I checked. I failed to get one.
Exactly. Or look at music. You have global superstars like Megan Thee Stallion performing in full, elaborate cosplay on the world's biggest stages. This isn't just nerd culture hiding in a convention center anymore. It is luxury. It is hip-hop. It's the dominant aesthetic of global youth culture.
And Hollywood is terrified, right? Or at least paying very close attention.
Terrified and constantly borrowing from it. You see it everywhere. Directors like the Wachowskis or Guillermo del Toro openly talk about its influence. You see Hollywood directors using anime-style storyboarding for their action sequences, that high-speed dynamic camera movement, the impossible physics.
And the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
The entire structure of the MCU, the idea of interconnected storytelling across dozens of films, characters constantly scaling up in power levels, tournament arcs, team-ups. That is pure shonen anime structure, perfected by things like Dragon Ball Z decades earlier.
And Inception, that's the big one.
Christopher Nolan has openly admitted that the film Inception owes a massive debt to a 2006 anime film called Paprika by Satoshi Kon. The core idea of dream-sharing technology, the visual of a hallway rotating, the reality-shattering glass, it's all there.
So it's like anime became the unofficial R&D department for global storytelling.
That is a brilliant way to put it. It's where Hollywood goes for its new ideas.
And we can't ignore the delivery mechanism that made all this possible, streaming. Specifically, Netflix and Crunchyroll.
Oh, the streaming wars completely changed the game. They triggered a global gold rush. In the past, to to watch anime in the West, you had to hunt for it. It was an effort. You had to buy expensive imported DVDs or stay up until 2 in the morning to watch Toonami on Cartoon Network. It was an economy of scarcity.
I remember those days. Setting the VCR.
And now?
Now it's an economy of absolute abundance. Netflix pours billions of dollars into producing original anime. It's a tab on their home screen. It shifted the entire consumption model from hunting for a rare gem to binging an endless buffet.
It lowered the barrier to entry to zero. Your grandma could accidentally start watching Attack on Titan.
Which has totally changed the accessibility and the global reach. But I want to zoom in a bit now. We've talked big picture history, money, psychology. Let's look at some specific examples, some case studies that really highlight these different aspects of the industry. The sources lay out 3 good ones: the artist, the system, and the deconstruction.
A perfect trio. Let's start with the artist. You have to start with Studio Ghibli, and specifically with Spirited Away.
2001, the movie that changed everything for anime in the West.
This film is just crucial. And again, you have to remember the context of when it came out. 2001, Japan is deep in its lost decade. That economic bubble we talked about from the 80s, it burst spectacularly in the early 90s. The economy stagnated for years. A whole generation of young people felt completely aimless, watching their parents' promise of lifelong employment and prosperity just evaporate.
A lot of anxiety and uncertainty.
Immense. And into this climate, Hayao Miyazaki releases a movie about a spoiled, whiny, listless 10-year-old girl named Chihiro.
Who gets trapped in a world of spirits and gods.
Right. But notice what the solution to her problem is. She doesn't find a magic sword and fight a dragon. She doesn't discover she has superpowers.
She gets a job.
She gets a job. She literally loses her name, has it taken from her, and has to earn it back by scrubbing the floors in a magical bathhouse.
Yeah.
It was a cultural therapy session for the nation of Japan. It validated the idea of resilience, of community, of hard, unglamorous work, of environmental respect. It wasn't just a fantasy movie. It was a deeply conservative, in the traditional sense, message to the youth of Japan. You can survive this economic downturn, but you have to work. You have to scrub the floors.
And it wins the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. It proved to the entire Western world that anime could be high art.
It shattered the ceiling. It wasn't just Jap animation anymore.
Okay, so that's the artist. Then on the complete flip side of that, we have Demon Slayer. The source calls this one the system's peak.
Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba. If Ghibli is the handcrafted, artisanal walnut furniture, Demon Slayer is the perfectly engineered, mass-produced iPhone.
It's slick.
It is a flawless, almost algorithmic execution of established shonen tropes. You have the impossibly kind hero, the tragic backstory that fuels him, the cool sword techniques, the grueling training montage, the band of quirky friends.
All of it. It doesn't really reinvent the wheel from a narrative standpoint, does it?
Not at all. But what made it explode into a global phenomenon was the animation, specifically by the studio in Fandom. They took these standard comfortable tropes and elevated them with a level of visual spectacle that was previously unimaginable on a TV budget. The way they integrated 3D CGI with traditional 2D drawing was seamless and breathtaking.
But there is a debate there, right? Among critics and hardcore fans.
A huge debate. Critics ask, is it a masterpiece of storytelling? Or is it just a perfectly engineered commercial product? It hits every single emotional button in that database we talked about earlier with perfect precision. It's efficient, it's incredibly effective. But is it challenging? Does it say anything new? Maybe not.
It's the peak of the formula.
The absolute peak.
And then the third case study, the one that definitely was challenging, the one that broke the formula, Neon Genesis Evangelion.
You cannot have a serious conversation about modern anime without talking about EVA. It aired in the mid-90s, right in the middle of that lost decade. It started out looking like another giant robot show, but it ended up being a brutal deconstruction of depression, parental neglect, religious trauma, and existential dread.
It's famous for being the show where the hero does not want to get in the robot.
He hates the robot, he hates his father who built it, he hates himself for piloting it. The creator, Hideaki Anno, was famously going through severe clinical depression while making the show, and that raw, unfiltered pain just bled onto the screen.
I heard they ran out of money at the end, too.
They did. The production completely fell apart, and the final 2 episodes dissolve into this abstract, experimental collage of crayon drawings, still frames, and internal monologue. It's basically a therapy session on film.
And the audience loved it.
They were confused, angry, but ultimately they felt seen. Many young viewers who were feeling those same nameless anxieties of the lost decade saw themselves and their struggles reflected on screen for the very first time. It articulated emotions that many of them couldn't verbalize themselves. It proved that this medium could handle the absolute darkest, most complex parts of the human psyche.
So we have the cultural therapy of Ghibli, the commercial perfection of Demon Slayer, and the personal trauma of Evangelion. That's a powerful spread.
It really shows the incredible range of the medium. It could be anything.
But, and there's always a but, isn't there? We have to talk about the dark side. Because you don't generate $55 billion a year without some serious friction, and we have to talk about where that money goes, or maybe more importantly, where it doesn't go.
We need to talk about the Black Factory.
This is the part of the story that always shocks people. You hear $55 billion industry, and you just assume the artists making the product are getting rich.
It is almost always the opposite. The industry, as it's currently structured, relies on the systematic burnout of its young, passionate animators. And to understand why that is, you have to understand the bizarre economic structure called the production committee system, or Seisakuinkai.
Okay, you have to break that down for us. What on earth is a production committee?
So making an anime series is incredibly expensive and extremely risky. Most shows don't become massive hits, they fail to make their money back. If a single animation studio tried to fund a show all by itself and it flopped, the studio would go bankrupt instantly.
So they need to spread the risk.
Exactly. To mitigate that risk, a group of different companies forms a temporary committee. You'll have a TV station, maybe a big manga publisher, a toy company, a music label, and an ad agency. They all pool their money together to fund the show.
That just sounds like standard investing, spreading the risk around, like in Hollywood.
It is. But here is the fundamental trap for the artists. The committee pays the animation studio a fixed one-time budget to actually make the show. If that show then becomes a massive global hit like Demon Slayer, and it makes billions of dollars in merchandise, movie tickets, and international licensing.
Does the animation studio that actually drew every frame get a cut of that massive profit?
In most cases, no. Almost never. The profits go back to the investors on the committee, the toy company, the TV station. The studio just keeps that original flat fee, which they probably already spent, and then some, just keeping the lights on and paying their staff.
So the studios themselves are stuck in a perpetual cycle of work for hire. They have no equity, no ownership in their own most successful creation.
Precisely, which means the only way for the studio to survive is to take on more and more projects and to keep their production costs as terrifyingly low as possible. And what is the biggest and most flexible cost in any creative industry?
Labor. People.
The animators. That is why even today, in 2026, entry-level, in-between animators, the people doing the grunt work of drawing the frames that make things move, can earn less than $10,000 a year in Tokyo, one of the most expensive cities on Earth.
That's below poverty wages. That's sleeping under your desk wages, which is a real thing we hear about.
It is a real and documented thing. It's often called a black company in Japan, a business that systematically exploits its workers until they burn out or break. There was a law passed in 2024, the Freelance Law, which was a small step forward. It mandated written contracts and payment within 60 days, which helped with some of the worst cases.
But it didn't fix the core structural problem.
Not at all. It didn't touch the committee system.
And now, in 2026, the industry has a new potential solution that might be even scarier for the artists in the long run. And that's AI.
The AI disruption is here. Currently, our sources say AI tools are being used to automate up to about 15% of the most labor-intensive tasks, mostly creating background art and doing the in-betweening work that those low-paid animators do.
Which, on paper, sounds good for efficiency, right? If you can automate the boring parts, the human artist can focus on the creative, cool parts.
That is the optimist's view, certainly.
Yeah.
But the existential question being debated in the industry right now is, can a machine replicate Sakuga?
Sakuga, you need to define that for the listeners. It's a key term.
Sakuga is a fan term, but it's been adopted. It refers to those specific moments in an anime where the animation quality suddenly dramatically spikes. The movement becomes incredibly fluid, the effects are explosive, the detail is immense, it's soulful, it is the individual artist showing off their unique skill. It's the moment of human expression.
It's the difference between a drum machine playing a perfect beat and a live jazz drummer doing an improvised solo.
That is the perfect analogy. So the fear is, if you automate more and more of the process to save money and increase output, do you lose the soul? Do you lose the human touch? The expert consensus is that the hand-drawn human spirit might become an endangered artifact, a luxury good.
So you'd have, like, Premium, handcrafted human anime for the connoisseurs, and then mass-produced fast food anime generated by AI for the masses.
That is the dystopian future many animators are afraid of.
It's a depressing thought. And there's one more risk mentioned here that's tied to globalization. The Galapagos syndrome.
This is the other side of the globalization coin. The term comes from biology, from the Galapagos Islands, where unique species evolved because they were in total isolation. Japan's culture, and by extension its anime, was so unique for so long because it was, in many ways, culturally isolated.
But now, with Netflix and Crunchyroll, the studios are trying to please a global audience from day one.
So they might start sanding down the rough, culturally specific edges to make it more palatable for everyone, right?
Exactly. The fear is that if you try to appeal to everyone on the planet, you might end up appealing to no one in a deep, meaningful way. They might stop making things that are uniquely, weirdly Japanese with all the complex cultural nuance and start making things that just look like generic Western media but with big eyes.
They lose the very flavor that made us fall in love with it in the first place. That is the danger of the Galapagos syndrome in reverse.
Now, speaking of the world, let's look at how different cultures actually consume this stuff. Because it's not a monolith. The way a French person sees anime is completely different from how an American sees it.
Oh, it varies wildly. It's a great case study in cultural interpretation. Take France and Italy, for example.
I was really surprised by this. France is the second biggest consumer of manga in the entire world, right after Japan itself.
Yes, and the reason is history. In the 80s and 90s, countries like France and Italy aired anime on primetime afternoon television. Shows like Dragon Ball, Sailor Moon, Captain Harlock.
So it wasn't a niche late-night thing like it was in the US?
Not at all. So for a French adult today who is 40 years old, anime isn't a nerd thing they discovered in college. It's a foundational childhood memory. It's their version of Looney Tunes or Disney. It's completely, totally mainstream.
And what about China?
China is a massive and massively complicated market. They are a huge consumer of Japanese anime, and increasingly, they're a producer of their own high-quality animation, which is called donghua. But everything is subject to strict government censorship.
So it's a constant negotiation.
It's a delicate dance. Anime series have to be heavily edited to enter the Chinese market. No skeletons, no excessive violence, no unhealthy social themes, absolutely no political commentary. So the medium has to sanitize itself to access those viewers.
What about the Middle East? That one was fascinating.
This is one of my favorite examples of cultural adaptation. In the 70s and 80s, a giant robot show called Grendizer was a massive culture-defining hit across the Arab world.
A giant robot show.
Yes. It was dubbed into Arabic. It was often edited to align with local cultural and religious norms, but the core themes of defending your homeland, of honor, of protecting the innocent, they resonated deeply. It just shows how malleable anime is. You can take a Japanese robot show, and it can become a beloved Middle Eastern cultural touchstone for a generation.
And then there's the US. How do we watch it differently?
The US is so interesting because we tend to interpret almost everything through a lens of rugged individualism.
The lone cowboy mythos, the self-made hero.
Right. So we watch a show like Naruto, and we see a story about a kid pulling himself up by his bootstraps to become the boss, the Hokage. We love the chosen one narrative, but in doing so, we sometimes flatten or completely miss the collectivist themes that are central to Japanese culture.
What do you mean by that?
The idea that the hero only succeeds because of the village, because of the support of his team, because of the sacrifices of his teachers. For us, the team is there to support the hero's journey. In the Japanese context, the hero's journey is often in service of the team, of the group. We tend to filter it to fit our preferred hero's journey mold.
We see what we want to see.
We always do.
Yeah.
That's how culture works.
So, okay, we have looked at the past, the money, the psychology, and the globe. We have covered a lot of ground. Now we have to look to the future. We're sitting here in 2026. What is the outlook? Where is this all going?
Well, the fundamental paradox of anime isn't going away. It's both a mirror and an escape hatch.
A mirror and an escape hatch.
It reflects our deepest anxieties back at us, our fears about AI, about climate change, about social decay, about war. But it also gives us a fantastical place to hide from those very same things.
And maybe a place to resolve them in a fictional space.
Hopefully. That's the best case scenario.
Oh.
But the really pressing question for the rest of this decade, the one that animators and producers and even governments are grappling with, is how will anime redefine what it means to be human in an increasingly AI-driven century?
That's the big one. If an AI can rate the script that hits all the database points and another AI can draw the frames fluidly,
then what is the role of the human artist? What is left for us to do? It's a choice. Will we, as a culture, choose to invest in sustainable creativity, which means paying artists a living wage, valuing the beautiful flaws of the human hand? Or will we succumb to the algorithm of hollow consumption?
Just hitting that Mo button over and over again?
Hitting it over and over again because it stimulates the brainstem and moves product, even if it leaves us feeling empty.
It really feels like we're at a crossroads.
I think the whole world is. Anime is just reflecting it more clearly than most things.
So let's try to wrap this up. Let's synthesize. We've gone from the literal ruins of post-war Japan to a $55 billion basic industry. We've seen how this one specific medium now shapes how we dress, how we create memes, how we dream, and even how we form our identities.
And I think at the end of the day, anime endures and thrives because despite all the commercialization, despite the algorithms and the black factories, at its core, it is unapologetically sincere.
Sincere in what way?
Yes. In a Western pop culture landscape that is often so cynical, so ironic, so meta, and too cool for school, anime still believes in things. It still believes in the power of friendship. It still believes in screaming your feelings at the top of your lungs. It believes that trying really, really hard at something actually matters.
Sincerity as a superpower. I like that.
In a cynical world, it's the ultimate superpower.
It is. Okay, I want to leave everyone with one final provocative thought to mull over. We talked early on about anime functioning as a social script, a set of stories that teach us how to be people in the modern world.
Right.
If that script is increasingly being written not by a single artist like Miyazaki, but by an AI optimizing for engagement, or by a commercial committee trying to maximize shareholder value, who is actually writing the story of our future identity? Are we the main characters in our own lives, or are we just becoming the consumers of a story someone else is selling us?
That is the question to keep you up at night.
On that cheery note, thank you so much for listening. Next time you boot up Crunchyroll or you see a kid walking down the street in a one-piece t-shirt, remember, you are not just looking at a cartoon, you're looking at the infrastructure of the modern world. Thanks for diving in with us.
My pleasure. Goodbye.